Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. It's just so amazing to see such a crowd for our Agents and Agency panel tonight. My name's Halimah Marcus. I'm the director of Electric Literature. We're a literary nonprofit with the mission of expanding the influence of literature in popular culture. We do that with our website, electricliterature.com, which includes criticism, essays, poetry, comics, fiction, and 2 weekly fiction magazines, Recommended Reading and Okie Panky. So writers make up a big part of our audience, and it's also the people that we work with every day. So partnering with the Authors Guild and the Center for Fiction to do this series was a natural fit. You know, we really want to give back to the community that we're a part of. So we have 3 wonderful agents on our panel today, and I'm going to ask you all to we'll just go down the line and hear about your agency, just a little bit about what kind of work you look for, what size agency you work for, and then we'll dig into it. So Anjali?
Hi, I'm Anjali Singh. I'm an agent at Ayesha Pande Literary. I've been an agent for only a year and a half, but I've been in publishing for almost 20 years. Is that me? And I was an editor for many years before becoming an agent, so that was pretty good training. Right now, the agency is Ayesha Pande, who was also an editor before she founded the agency 10 years ago, and myself, and Madison Smartbell, who's also a writer, and an assistant. So we're very, very small and very hands-on. You can't hear?
I think we'll try to be a little. Okay, we'll try to.
You can't hear in the back?
No, we can't.
Okay. No,
Okay,
no. Thanks for letting us know.
enunciate.
It felt like there was feedback, but.
Anjali could use your mic.
Okay.
And then should I turn this off?
No, can you keep it on?
Okay.
It's not going to be feedback.
Okay. So for those of you in the back who didn't hear, so I'm an agent at Ayesha Pande Literary. Ayesha founded the agency 10 years ago after a career as an editor. And I joined about a year and a half ago after a career as an editor. So we consider ourselves to be very editorially focused. We're very small, we're very hands-on. And we both, Ayesha had really established an identity for the agency when I joined, but I think what we're both looking for is obviously very, very good fiction and nonfiction projects, but we're definitely both drawn to stories that represent marginalized voices or outsider voices, and something, if possible, international, something we haven't seen before. But it's really hard to generalize, because basically if we get a book and it's really good and it speaks to us, we're going to want to represent it. Did I answer all your questions?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
So
You can go
can
ahead.
everyone hear? No.
Should we take it?
I'll take it.
Yeah, we'll take it out. Okay. Good idea. There you go.
Tape though. Sorry, everyone. Is this better? Okay. So my name is Jackie Ko. I'm an agent at the Wylie agency. We're a bigger agency. We represent over 900 clients worldwide. We have 2 offices in New York and London. Although I would keep in mind that even a very big literary agency is still very, very small compared to most companies, almost any company that you would work at. I started at Wylie Agency as an assistant, and I have been there for almost 10 years. I represent both literary fiction and various kinds of nonfiction, history, science, humor, cultural criticism, journalism, so forth and so on. Our mission at the Wylie Agency is really to represent work that is lasting literature. We represent many eminent literary estates, such as the estate of Vladimir Nabokov, for example, and that's the kind of work that we seek out, that we feel that we can champion around the world. We have a focus on foreign rights and on internationalism, meaning that if we want to represent lasting works of literature, lasting works of history, and important intellectual ideas, we represent not just American authors, but authors worldwide. And we also try to place our American and British authors' work in foreign languages worldwide as well. So, which we do without sub-agents. We hand sell in every territory around the world. And we're an independently owned company, and have been in business since the 1980s. So we're quite well established. We can maybe talk more about sizes of agencies a little bit more later in the panel.
Probably won't be just not working. You could be.
If I could use this one.
Are we good?
Okay, go.
Should I turn this one off?
No, I'm going to use
Oh,
this
I
one.
see.
then you
Okay.
can use that
Okay.
Sorry.
Like a leash.
Thank you everyone for bearing with us with
Technical difficulties.
We're all English majors up
Yeah,
here,
that was my joke. So my name is Mariah Spence. I'm at Janklow and Nesbit. I would say that we're mid-sized boutique. We have about 10 agents in the office. We also have a UK office. We look also for writers with a foreign footprint or a foreign interest, intellectually focused, lasting literature, all very good descriptions of what we look for. I personally look for literary fiction and narrative nonfiction. I have my memoirists, I have my cultural critics, and my training and my background comes from actually, I would say, of course, being an English major, but also getting my MFA, and in the course of doing that in fiction at NYU, kind of feeling like my strengths were in connecting with others about their work and really wanting to champion and stand in front of those people and be kind of a support system for them. So I would say that that's a lot of what I got into the business for, and it remains why I go to work. What else can I say? I would say that's about it.
Well, it's interesting, we have these agents sitting here that may seem kind of out of reach or maybe a little glamorous, or the whole job of an agent seems like a position of power of people that you're hoping to access and to court somehow and to reach. But I wanted to ask about how each of our panelists became agents, and we heard a bit about that, because it is like a job like any other that you come to through trying different things. Anjali had a long career as an editor, and Jackie's worked herself through the company from an assistant. And Mariah, you tried a few different things in the publishing field. So is there anything that you'd want to add about what connects you as an agent and maybe in your personal life to the struggle of a writer? The pain.
The pain, wow.
You want to start?
Sure, I'll start. Also, if there's like a stand there may be a way to turn this off that I'm not aware of, or we can just hold it.
I don't think we need to turn it off.
Okay. The struggle of the writer, I'm well acquainted with. Yeah, I think that for me it is a really craft-based business, and so like I said, it was really kind of feeling like I could read someone else's manuscript, and if there was some kind of a chemistry there, I felt like I could get inside of it and kind of maybe get behind the wheel, or talk to them about its strengths and weaknesses. So I think, in a way, it's actually an editorial instinct that is my first foot forward with agenting. But it certainly has become a lot of other practical elements to juggle. So we were talking upstairs about the finances of writers. I know that you guys have a panel lined up. Your third panel is about those struggles, but it's, I think ultimately we're here to talk about who, how to find your agent and what you're looking for. And one of those things I feel strongly is someone that you can, come to when you have those hard questions. And sometimes those questions really are financially based. So, it's kind of a personality match as well. But that comfort level is really, really important to me.
My sense is the question was also about how do we humanize our experience. We seem like we're the arbiters of power, right? But as agents, we're your first enthusiasts, we're your coaches, we're your psychologists, we're your handholders, we're all of those things. But we also have to pick ourselves up again and again because we get the rejections too. And as an editor, I think too, when you're sitting up on that, in this privileged position of getting to decide what you're going to buy, but so much, even when you've invested in a book, is out of your hands, and that there are many, many times in all of these careers where you get to feel like a failure. And I feel like we don't seem like, I guess it seems easier from our perspective, but there are many, many times where we have to pick ourselves up too. And know that really good work doesn't always get the reception that it deserves. That you're querying us, and I'm saying to writers all the time, I wish that I could help every talented writer. It's not that you're not talented. It's that literally my bread and butter is selling this book to a trade publisher, and this is what a trade publisher is looking for. And there are many, many places that would serve you very well. And it isn't even meant to be condescending. It's like there's a reality here, and the reality is that we agents live on our commissions. So we can only really commit to the books that we think are going to find a home at the bigger houses initially. And then, it's not an easy business. There was something else I was going to say, but I'll remember later.
Well, I'll pitch this next one to Jackie. You both alluded to the relationship between an agent and a writer and how it involves many different aspects. There's a financial aspect, there's some like an emotional relationship, there's an editorial relationship. So Jackie, maybe you could speak to, just on the most basic level, what is involved in the relationship between an agent and a writer? What does an agent do for a writer? And then building on that, what makes a good relationship?
Sure, great question. So one of the reasons that it is really fun and interesting to be an agent is that it's very individualized depending on the author. So, no author is the same. And every client has different needs, they have different work, they have different personalities. They might need money, they might need, a shoulder to cry on. They might just not need any of that and just need you to do their contract. So it varies a lot depending on who you're working with, and that's kind of part of the joy of agenting, is like you develop that relationship with each individual writer. I think that a good relationship always relies on communication. So I know that people always want to hear kind of about trying to find an agent and how you get an agent. I kind of feel like there's no magic trick to finding an agent, and it's not that interesting to talk about. I feel like it's really interesting when you have an agent, learning to work with them, and part of that process is communicating clearly with your agent and your agent communicating clearly to you. So, you should be able to tell your agent what's important to you. What are your goals in your career? Like, is your goal to have your name on every major paper? Is your goal to be thought of as like highly literary? Is your goal to be like reach a mass audience, or any of those things? And you should be able to, your agent should know those things, and also it's important to remember that your agent can't read your mind. So if you don't tell your agent those things, they won't know, and they won't be able to get it for you.
Right, so on the most basic level, an agent sells your work to publishers and then takes a commission, and then beyond that, your relationship might be characterized depending on what kind of work you're producing and what kind of relationship you're looking for. At what point in a writer's career is it appropriate to begin looking for an agent? How much work should they have produced? Do they need to have a book ready? Are you in the business of selling short work like essays and stories? Maybe we'll start with Anjali.
So because we're really small and really hands-on, we will occasionally try and place a short story for our clients, but usually we have not committed to them based on the short stories. Usually we've already committed to them because they've written a longer work that we already know that we can try to sell. Once I commit to an author, it's not usually that the project is ready to go. There's usually a good 9 to 12 month kind of development period with your agent before it even goes to editors. Because as I'm sure you've heard a million times, editors are always looking for a good reason to say no. But I tell writers that really when you query an agent is when you have done everything you possibly can on your own to get the book ready. You've been in writing workshops, or you've given it to a peer writing group. Sometimes I'll see a promising project and actually send a writer to a freelance editor because I can't commit to doing a really hands-on edit on every single project, or that I see that there's potential. It might not be right for me, but that it really needs to be one more level up. But honestly, we're very small and we're getting 30 queries a day. I can't imagine what you guys are getting. So we too are looking for any reason to say no. The other thing I would say though about the pitch, I know it's a later question, but I saw it, is so often people summarize their books or basically give us a short summary, but they don't actually bother to explain why it's important. Like, why is this adding to what we've never seen before? Why did you write it? Or why would somebody want to read it? It's not enough to just be able to give a good short synopsis of your book, but really being able to ask that question in a way that makes the agent curious and want to read is very helpful.
I think that's a good segue into what we can call the do's and don'ts portion of the panel. When you're approaching an agent, you're doing that with a query letter, and there are always so many questions about how to do that. You can certainly find examples and some best practices online, and every agent has different preferences, but there are maybe some just kind of do's and don'ts. We can just share your personal pet peeves, and agents get asked this a lot, so maybe we'll start with Mariah.
Sure. I was thinking about this on the way over, and it's a question that comes up often. I have a kind of like a funny, nitpicky answer, and then I also have one that I feel I want to say more often. I get a lot of referrals through my writers, and that's an amazing thing. And it's certainly, those, I'm more inclined to, want to have an answer for that writer because they come through another writer and they've, someone's speaking for them, etc. But one thing I've noticed is that I think, the match, which I'll keep coming back to, like the compatibility, is really a lot about taste. And I wouldn't over rely on, saying that you're a friend of my writer, or not even necessarily. It's good to lay out all the reasons that we might really have the same taste, but when it comes down to it, it really is about personal taste. So I guess what I'm saying is be wary of kind of assuming that we should work together just because we are kind of moving in similar circles. And then my kind of nitpicky answer, which is just kind of like a blooper reel, but there are certain like common sense or common sense issues that come up in query letters a lot that I'll just lay out for you. The spelling of your agent's name, is really important. Also, we were also talking about this backstage, just remembering that there is a human on the other side of that email, and that you're trying to avoid seeming like you're kind of mass spraying the agent industry. I think it should be a personalized decision, and it should feel as such. So a do from that don't would be, I do like to know that you know my list and that, you see certain overlaps there, that's very helpful to me, and I think it's helpful to any agent. And it establishes a kind of personal rapport. So those are my...
Everyone likes to feel chosen, right? Like you'd like to feel that you were sought out because they know something about you. The writer knows something about you and your taste.
And what was maybe you could expand upon what you said about summaries and inquiry letters.
Okay, well, Ayesha, my colleague, had the very brilliant idea to institute a submission form before I got there. So anyone who queries us comes through our queries inbox and has to answer these questions. And one of them is, why did you choose us? It's a very helpful question. It's not the first thing I skim to. The first thing I skim to is the pitch, which is basically a line or two, which means you know how to describe your book in a line or two in a way that might make someone curious. And then there's a synopsis, which is usually about 250 words. And the guideline I always give to authors is read the back of a book and try and describe your book the way an editor has described a similar book. And that sort of means not telling too much and asking some questions that would make somebody want to pick up the book and read it. So, I mean, not every writer knows how or needs to know how to sell their book, but it is helpful if you have that skill. It certainly helps to get our attention. It makes us think, well, this will be less work than everything else because they already know how to talk about their book in a selling way. But it really is your first level of sales, right, is to talk about your book in a way that would make an agent say, hey, can I read 50 pages? Why you chose the agent, pitch, synopsis, and then we ask for the first 5 pages because that gives us a sense of actually the writing style. And then based on that is when we decide whether or not we're going to ask to see any more. Yeah.
And Jackie, how useful do you feel it is for writers to compare themselves to other writers and other books?
So I feel like this may be a topic where people have difference of opinion because I know that not everyone does feel this way. I personally don't. I never do comps to other titles when I'm pitching, and I don't really like it when people do it in their pitches to me. It's just something that I don't like. But I do know that other agents like it, so that's totally unhelpful to you.
What about our so we have a small sample size up here tonight. So what about the other two?
That is interesting. I remember being mortally offended when I was at Houghton and I was forced to compare my books publicly to other books because I thought it was in really bad taste. But I don't mind doing it as an agent when I'm trying to sell the book. But I don't usually like it when authors do it because they don't usually get it right. Like, I feel like authors think when I use a comp, I'm going to describe a book that's very similar in subject to the book that I'm writing. But actually a comp, when you're thinking about it from the publisher's perspective, is would it speak to the same readership as this book? And that's a slightly different question.
I think that's very on point. Like, I think the problem is that if you compare your book to like Dave Eggers, then you're like, in which way is your book like Dave Eggers' book, and which book, and which, like, what are you talking about exactly? So if you are able to pinpoint that and say, I really admire the prose style of so-and-so, then that's like a good comp. Or, I think that this book hits on similar themes as whatever. But most of the time I feel like when authors do it, they're just like, my book is just like, these great authors, and you're just like, that's not helpful. Yeah.
Right, I mean, it's not a way that a writer is used to thinking, because you think, well, who are my favorite writers? Who am I trying to be like? Who's influenced me? And then again, you might think on a more superficial level, well, my book is about a sibling relationship, and Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius is about a sibling relationship. But actually, they're not going to appeal to the same reader because your book is about 2 older women, or whatever it is. I'm spinning off these examples off the top of my head, but that's kind of a way that marketing people are used to thinking, or agents or editors are used to thinking. That might be a little bit out of the comfort zone of writers.
But I do find it reassuring when a writer can tell me that they sort of know who their books would sit alongside, right? I mean, I feel like it is a kind of savvy about the market that, again, not every writer has to have, and if you're the next Nabokov, you probably don't need to care. But I do find it, if you can say what books you sit alongside, and you're right, that is actually a point in your favor.
Well,
Yeah,
and
that's
that also raises the last thing I was going to say, which is the type of comp that you use, because I would say Nabokov, Steinbeck, and Wolf probably aren't the most useful comps. They're just so, and to go back to something that you said, Anjali, you could potentially work that into a backstory or a kind of a craft sort of inspiration, what sort of went into your influencers, what went into the making of this book. But, choosing like a bestseller or the most iconic writer is not gonna tell us much.
Here's an example of one that actually worked. I met her at a writers' conference, and I actually am representing her now, and it was a very short pitch letter. Actually, my favorite pitch letters are like really short. But at the end of it, she just said, I was really interested in the character of Moshumi, and Jumbuli here is the namesake because I really wondered what it was like to be the woman having the affair, and I wanted to write a book from her perspective. And her book really has nothing to do with the namesake, but the way she thought about her story, and it made me, it really piqued my curiosity.
So you're a writer. You've spent years writing stories and essays and sending them out, and then you have a draft of a novel, and you've revised it 5 times, and you've gotten feedback from your writing group and all your friends, and then you've done your research, and you found an agent that represents writers who are similar to you, and you've written a great query letter that spells their name correctly and treats them like a person and speaks intelligently and thoughtfully about your work, and you get an agent, and you have a great match. Then what happens, Mariah?
There is a development period, most likely. I've said before that it's such a rare book that arrives perfectly ready to go, and that's not a comment on, of course it's not a comment on the quality of the writer or the talent of the writer, but it's more of that kind of, the market that we know, and also something that agents do specifically is they know their editors, right? So if you've identified an agent because of their list, that's in part because they know who they sell to, they have those relationships, those are easy, good relationships, and they move in those channels a lot. So this is all to say that after you've been signed, if that's what the agency does, not all agencies have paperwork, but once you've gotten that agent, there should be, I think, some kind of a development period, whether that's 2 weeks, a month, or in some cases years and years, because also your agent should be adding value, right? So that's what happens next, and I think in that period of time, whatever it be, there's a lot of communication and a lot of there may be meetings, editorial meetings that you have with your agent. You may go through rounds of notes. There may be, a redlining period. But at a certain point, then you start talking submission strategy, which is usually, talking about what editors the agent picture's going to, and your agent should explain the process to you. Not, if they've forgotten to, gently remind them. They're not necessarily dropping that ball, but don't be afraid to ask questions. How does this work? How long do you think it should take? There may be good periods of time when the agent feels is right to submit your book. Often we're working around blackout periods, like the big international fairs. But yeah, so then there's sort of a strategizing period, and then you hold hands and you dive in together.
So what factors go into deciding where to send a book? Of course, there are the big 5 publishing houses that have many imprints, and then beyond that, there are many independent presses of a wide range of sizes. There are larger independents like Grove Atlantic, Coffee House, Grey Wolf, and then there may even be, Catapult, of course, and there may even be some really, some kind of tinier presses like $2 Radio. So how are you going just first to the big houses, and then if they get rejected there, then you work yourself down the line? Do you ever go straight to a smaller press?
get to answer this?
Sure.
Well, I feel terrible because I've only been doing this for a year and a half. So I really do say to people, like, I'm starting over mid-career and I have to make money and I can't take on this book if I think I can sell it to a small press. It doesn't mean I wouldn't be happy to sell a book to a small press, but I'm not going to take it on if I think that that's really the only home I can find for it. Any deal you get, eventually, you are happy with, and I think the small presses are doing some of the best publishing, which is why I often said writers, like, go. The independent presses are actually committed to fiction in a way that a lot of the big presses aren't, and you won't be lost, and you'll be a big fish in a small pond. I kind of wish in a way that I'd been agenting for 20 years so that I had more of a cushion and I could do more of those. I mean, the irony, one of the things that got me into agenting was feeling like I could work only on work that was meaningful to me. And that was really getting very hard as an editor on the corporate side. On the other hand, money is the driving force more than anything. I have to make decisions based on what I think I can actually sell. My favorite author question is, how much do you think you can sell this for? You just have no idea. Like, I mean, my answer is always like, we're just going to have to send this out and see what editors say. We really won't
so
know.
never ask your agent that question. Just warning you.
I got that question today. I was like, I can give you an example of a book that sold 15 years ago that was similar. But anyway, so that's my own answer. But I think that if you are, you know you're talented, you know you've written a good book, and you're not getting any traction with agents, please remember that that's kind of how they're thinking, which is not that this isn't a good book, but most of us have this financial reality. And if we're employees at a place, we have a salary we have to make back. And if we're not employees, we're living on our commissions. And it's actually really hard to do that and work on fiction. But having said that, yes, I would start with the big publishers. And the list is really just dictated on having been in the industry a long time, having a really good sense of what houses and editors like and do what. And then we have a wonderful resource called Publishers Marketplace. So I just took on a middle grade graphic novel and I could search like which editors have bought middle grade graphic novels. So it's a little bit like relationships and doing some research. And then, yeah, there's like a second round and a third round of sort of increasingly smaller places. The thing about small places is they can often, because have limited resources, they can be much slower to get back to you. So your ideal is you send it to a big trade publisher, you get 5 interested editors, you have an auction, and you move on. But sometimes the process is a lot longer. That's my answer.
Would you both agree with that, generally? So there is also, many small presses do take unagented submissions. They're usually not going to be in a position to give you an advance. Your royalty share might be better because of that. They won't have the same publicity engines, but you are going to you're going to get the love. You're going to probably get some freedom to be experimental, and you don't have to be commercial, and you might get to execute your vision in a more pure way.
You might have more of a partner in terms of thinking outside the box. It's sort of amazing how kind of by-the-book trade publishers still are when it comes to publicity and marketing. So one advantage of a small press or an independent publisher where you have a relationship with the publisher is you can really bring ideas to the table and get them to maybe buy in or let you run with it. I think there's actually a lot to be said about the really great independent publishing that's happening. But I have had friends who have queried them, said, oh, I just got an email saying we need 8 months to review. You know?
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that
the review
happen
period
too.
is 8 months.
That can happen too. If a publisher takes unsolicited manuscripts, that means they've got a stack like up to their ears. So that can slow things down.
I mean, another thing we haven't touched on, I mean, Mariah, you touched on it, is sort of the relationships, but it is actually really important to figure out, if you can, we all have 6 degrees of separation, a way to get to somebody who's doing work that you think is interesting through an introduction. It's just a much faster route to being seen and taken seriously than querying through the inbox. So it doesn't always mean that you're the perfect fit, because just because I published your friend X doesn't mean I'm going to love your work. But I do think, especially for the small presses, go to some of their readings. Like, develop relationships. It's all about relationships.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. So maybe we could actually build on that and talk about networking. What are ways that writers can get involved in a literary scene and start to build a reputation and build connections, so that the first time they're sending out their manuscript, it's to an agent, it's not the first time they've ever submitted something. Anyone have this?
Networking. I mean, I think my kind of the way I like to, I think my first impulse in sort of quantifying my compatibility with a writer and whether I want to work with them is frankly their publications. So I know this is sort of dodging the question, but to me, like the fact that I've seen your work published in, Tin House or Electric Literature or Paris Review, even the blog, that's gonna be more to me than the number of times that like we've run into each other at a reading. But that's not to dismiss the value of being a part of a community, which we're all a part of. So, I mean, I guess, when I started out agenting, I went to a lot of readings and I started to see the same people, and it not only was it a way for me to feel acclimated and really comfortable in my own skin and to kind of develop my own opinions of things, but it also, made it easier to drop a line to someone. We're all, yes, pretty accessible. You can kind of find anyone's email out there if you try hard enough. I personally have like DM'd writers. I've Facebook messaged them to get to them. I have called their assistants repeatedly. So yeah, I think I've said a few things, but I would say, work on the writing over the networking, but be a part of the community and have a kind of knowledge about it too. I think we all know that it's a pretty long shot to get into the New Yorker. Don't expect that you can sell your first short story to the New Yorker, but do show me that you have reasonable expectations to sell to I mean, I don't want to name anything lesser than the New Yorker, but have reasonable expectations based on the relationships that you have and the people that you've met.
Let's name some publications. So, I don't mean to cut you off, but after you say what you're going to say, I think we could talk about some publications that you read to look for writers, in addition to what Mariah mentioned.
Well, Mariah mentioned a bunch of publications that are great, including Electric Literature, of course. I was just going to say that I think that, just to build on that point, I think that as a writer, you really should be conscious that you're part of this community already, and when you're going out, you're going to events, and you're reading, you're writing, you're doing research, your goal isn't just get an agent. It's actually to find your place in this community that we're already in. And first of all, I don't think agents react very well to the people who are obviously just there to seek out an agent. A, that's very obvious. And B, I think that when you do those things and you read the books that you want to read and you go to the authors' events that you love, you're going to organically meet your group, and then you're going to organically meet your group of people and find your agent. So that's more how
I don't
it
think by
works,
networking
I think.
or getting to the agent, I really did mean schmoozing, but I did mean like read, build a community of writers, write fan letters to people whose books you admire, be a part of the community in that way. And by finding writer mentors, they can help connect you with people who can eventually help get you published.
And agents do read, as we're hearing, literary magazines, small ones, not just the New Yorker, not just the Paris Review. And even if, you have a bio that has a list of publications that can show that you've been working hard, would you say that makes a difference to previous publications? Yeah.
I'm not sure. Honestly, like when I meet with MFA students and they ask how much time should we spend sending stories out, it's not a bad use of your time, and an agent might read a story there, but in terms of like what moves the needle to help get you published, it's the Paris Review or the New Yorker. You can send me a list of I've had stories here, here, and here. It doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to publish your story collection. It might mean that you have a nice platform for the novel when it comes along. What's helpful for a story collection is if it's just very clearly thematically linked. So I was at an MFA program recently, and it's like, no. Oh, a collection of stories about girls and horses? Yes. Maybe that could sell, you know? Like, if there's something that's really going to hold it together. Anyway.
That's fair.
Sorry. I mean, I'm glad they exist.
I'm just trying to give a literary magazine plug since I edit one. I'm like, you look at that, right? It's important.
I think it's also, again, like it's not about getting a story out so that an agent will see it, which is like a really small chance of that happening, just so you know. But it's more just about getting a story out because you want to get your work out into the world, and maybe someone will read it and like it. But, you know.
And it means you've reached kind of a new level, right, if you're being published.
Yeah. So before we go to Q&A, let's just talk a little bit about auctions, because I think that's interesting and kind of opaque to probably lots of people. So how do those work?
Do you want to go get
Mariah?
Yeah, I mean, an auction is one of the ideal situations that can happen. So I guess to pick up where I left off when we were holding hands and diving in, if anyone can recall that reference. So now we've dived in, and let's say that there are, at least three publishers or, editors who have had their conversations. So, I don't know how much we want to go into this, but it's not just the editor loving the manuscript. It's the editor that, probably getting like enough into it to be able to tap their colleagues, the ones whose taste they know, who might tend to read for them. So they tap their colleagues and say, can you read along with me? They sort of have to gather. I mean, basically to acquire the manuscript, there has to be kind of a critical mass within the house of not just thumbs up, but real enthusiasm, which only serves you through the publication process. You really want enthusiasm. You don't want to be twisting arms. But so all that has happened, 3 editors have said, hey, I think I'm getting my ducks in a row, favorite phrasing, getting their ducks in a row. Things are starting to line up for them. They have signaled that, let me know your closing plans because I definitely want to be a part of it. And what your agent is doing is, and I recognize that it is a little opaque and that's not intentional. There is a lot of like sort of unquantifiable information past that isn't really worth your time knowing. This is where communication and trust really comes in.
And it does kind of change sometimes minute by minute or hour
Yeah.
by hour. Like once this is all happening, we're just getting new information all the time and trying to come up with
a general trend
strategy, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to, then the agent has to figure out what their strategy is going to be. With lots of time information changing, like the first person who called you and said they loved it actually didn't get support, so they're not coming to the table. But then somebody who didn't know was interested in it. Like it's just there's so much unknown. That's why we can't tell you how much we're going to get for it. Go on.
Yeah, and there are different kinds of auctions, and all of those are really based on what your agent is hearing and feels is a reasonable expectation for you. And that's also going to light a fire under publishers' asses, because if they really want to work with you, they should fight for it. So I don't know if I answered the question, but
yeah, basically we dive in, we send the manuscript out, and then we have zero power, right? We're just waiting. But as soon as an editor comes to us and says, I'm interested, then we get the power back, and we can call everyone else and say somebody's interested, and then we start to light the fire under their asses. So it's kind of this continual back and forth power game. But once you have, look, I mean...
Do you want to give an example maybe? Is that helpful?
Sure.
Like basically it's like if you get interest from one place and you think you're going to get an offer, then you would kind of like assess the other places that have it out, and you would be like, who do I think is interested of these other people? What have they said to me? Have they expressed interest? So as your agent is kind of like gauging how many offers they think they could possibly
and
get.
Getting information about who do you need to meet with? When is your meeting? Like what? Trying to get information about when they could even put money on the table, right?
Right, because
the
everyone. Publisher will say stuff to you. Sorry, this is getting really like nitty gritty, but then the publisher will say stuff to you that's like, okay, but I have the editorial meeting on Wednesday, so then I can't get back to you until after that or whatever. So
Right,
you
or my
know
boss
what
is
the
on
timing
vacation.
is. So then your agent will like formulate a strategy. Basically, you're in your agent's hands at this point. Like, there's nothing you can do.
Trust
so
your agent.
Just listen to what your agent says and like, don't try to freak out too much. And then, so if you get an offer, let's say someone offers a low offer, then your agent might, actually this is a little controversial because we do our auctions a little bit differently, but we do it more as a bidding war. But anyway, based on the amount that people bid, then your agent might go around to other people who they know are interested, get them to bid higher, and then if they get higher bids, go around to the same people who bid before, get them to go higher. So that's the kind of thing that they're doing. But again, like, you have no control over this process. So at that point, you want to be really solid with your agent and feel like you can trust them, as Mariah was saying, like, because you're kind of in their hands. So you want to be communicating clearly with your agent kind of before that point.
Yeah, and one question I do get a lot is, how do I know if I'm with the right agent? And I feel like it is like assessing any other relationship, right? If they're not communicating with you, that's probably not a healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that by the time you get to this stage, you really should be in a very healthy, trusting relationship with your agent, that they've given you concrete, helpful feedback on your manuscript. They've talked you through the process. They've told you who they've sent it to. I mean, it seems really straightforward, but I would say that not every agent is that clear. And I feel like the agent is working for the author. They work for you. So you really are entitled to as much information as you would like to have from your agent. And if they're not forthcoming, then maybe it isn't a healthy relationship.
Yeah, I think the analogy I always fall back on is like dating. So it's kind of like, if you feel bad every time you talk to your agent, if you don't have communication from them,
If they don't call
that's
you
a bad
back.
sign. So you should like know whether it's a good relationship or not. And I also just want to make the point that there's a lot of focus on auctions. But I think the reason we were all sighing is that like that's not the only
Way it goes. Yeah.
There's no shame if you don't have an auction for your book. So I'm just saying.
I know. And I did just say, you can get answers from your agent. And at the same time, you have to be respectful of their time. Because if you do sort of keep batting down on your agent's door and say, every 3 days, can you read my new draft? They will get tired of you.
One last question before we open it up. Since you brought up the dating analogy, what happens when an agent and a writer need to break up? How does that work?
Well, yeah, dating. I think it's always a question of compatibility, and if you can see taking that next step together. So, kind of like objective language that assesses kind of how things what your experience has been and what you're looking for in this next phase is always really helpful. I mean, I guess part of the question is, should you line up another agent before breaking up with yours, or, what's the etiquette? I think it's
Slightly
natural.
unethical.
Yeah, but it happens that, writers are very quietly wondering whether they will find someone to represent them next. I mean, then again, that's not really a healthy relationship, because you should only be with someone if you want to be with them. But just be discreet and don't try to leverage people against each other. I mean, this can happen at any stage in your relationship with your agent. And all of these relationships can be leveraged against each other, and just don't do it.
It's a tiny industry, so we actually
Yeah.
all know everything.
Yeah, and we like each other, actually. So, it's tricky moving around. But all that being said, it's not the end of the world. No one's dying. If it's not working, if it's not working for you, it's probably not working for your agent, to be totally honest.
Yeah, but I like what you said. I mean, use objective language and just be straightforward and treat your agent the way you would want to be treated. So I feel like if it's not working, but I think Mariah's right. If it's not working for you, it's probably not working for your agent, and I think there's a way to part ways amicably. And that's, that should be the
I
goal.
think the analogy still applies. Like, just remember to respect your agent if you're breaking up with them, and just like try to do it in a straightforward, like honest way, respecting the work that they've done for you. Whether or not you have someone lined up already, just don't be like flaunting it or whatever. So it should. It just like the same way you would treat any other human relationship that's important.